providing emergency first aid, including tourniquets. The victims, we originally thought there were 9. One had been double reported at one of the hospitals. So at this point, unless someone went to a hospital and brought themselves to a hospital, which more than one did, we're aware of, at this point, 8, unless someone else took themselves to a different hospital and we're not aware of them. But the 8 ones that we have is an 8-year-old boy who has a gunshot wound to the head. He's in critical condition. We have a 4-year-old with a boy with a wound to the thigh. He's stable. A 39-year-old woman with wounds to the abdomen and leg. She's in critical. That's all from one family. We have a 39-year-old white female. She has wounds to the back and arm. She's considered stable. A 30-year-old female with wounds to the thigh and buttocks. She's considered stable. A 30-year-old male with a right leg wound, considered stable. A 78-year-old male with an abdominal wound, considered stable. A 37-year-old female with a hand wound, considered stable. A 40-year-old male with a right knee wound, considered stable as well. So first, I'd like to thank the community for responding. A lot of people reached out and are very supportive, obviously. I, in my worst nightmare, couldn't imagine standing up here again talking about another active shooter. This agency has responded to multiple active shooters, multiple mass casualties. Oxford, we went to MSU and down Rochester Hills. And in between, we've responded to active shooters. So unfortunately, this has become all too common in America, but especially too common in our community. And I am very, very proud of our people, again, in very difficult circumstances. And not only because of their quick response, their triaging of the situation, but the individual deputies got on scene very quickly and began to look at evidentiary things on scene. And by some of the things they saw, they did some intelligence work and came up with a possible address. Cars were deployed to that address, and a vehicle matching the description of the car that drove away from the scene — we didn't have a license plate, we had a description — was seen in that driveway. And we're still working on the timelines because we still had radio traffic that was only emergency only, but we believe within 45 minutes to an hour, we had containment on a home, which ultimately had the suspect inside. Contact was made. There was some, I wouldn't call it communication, but at least an acknowledgement that the person was in that home, and we had that person contained. We set a hard perimeter on it. We brought in assets, including our SWAT, our helicopter, our drones, and tried to make contact with the person, tried to bring that person out peacefully, and to no avail, had no contact back. After a period of time, we breached the home and deployed drones to begin an examination of the home to make a determination if it was still a hostile actor, and we located the individual deceased in the home. The reason that quick containment is critically important, in my opinion, and why potentially more lives were saved, is we don't know what the next chapter was going to be. And when the drone flew into the home, this was on the kitchen table. So he didn't have just a handgun on that particular endeavor. He had obviously what looks to be an AR platform. Is still being processed, so I'm not sure. If I had to guess, I would say it's a semi-automatic .223, but I don't know for a fact until that scene's processed. But what I do know is that individual was in that house with that weapon, and I'm not sure how many other weapons were in that house. Again, it's still an active scene being processed. But I believe that because we had quick containment on him, that if he had planned to do anything else, and it wouldn't surprise me, because having that on the kitchen table is not an everyday activity, that there was probably something else, a second chapter, potentially. Obviously, we'll be looking for any evidence or manifesto or anything that would give us an inclination of what may be driving this individual prior to this terrible moment. We have no contact on record with him, either at that home by Shelby Township or in a criminal history that we're aware of. So it's going to be one of those challenges to try to figure out why there appears to be no connection between the victims and the location whatsoever. The person doesn't live in Rochester Hills. He went to a Rochester Hills park. So it may be very much like Michigan State University, where the person had no connection to Michigan State but just decided to go there to find victims. So that's where we are. Very active scene. Obviously, most of the information I'm giving you, that's our best at this moment, but it's still obviously very much in flux as we continue to investigate this situation.
I'm not sure I understand.
My watch doesn't understand even. So, again, I'm very proud of our team, the way they worked quickly, the way they deployed, the way they gained containment, and we made entry very quickly to ascertain if it was going to be an ongoing situation and to have conclusion at least tonight. Our most fervent hope at this point is that all of the injured victims have speedy recoveries. None of us in this room, in this community, or in this country anticipated, going into Father's Day weekend with this kind of tragedy that families will be deeply affected by forever. And so we're going to do all we can to support them. I know the County Executive's Office has stood up in conjunction with Rochester Hills counseling that will be available at the Public Service Office tomorrow from 8 to 10 to 4. 10 to 4 tomorrow. If anybody needs counseling, no appointments necessary. You'll be able to go there, talk to people. We're here. We're supportive. Anything you need. And I hate to say it, but we still have All for Oxford Resiliency Center in place. If people need someone to talk to or need support, it'll be available there as well. Before I get to two other folks, there were their questions about the law enforcement stuff.
What else can you tell us about this suspect? Age, or did he live alone? Anything like that?
At this point, as I said, we don't have any contact or criminal information on him. He is a white male, 42 years old, believed to have lived with his mom. She was not home. She has been notified. It's our understanding that apparently he was undergoing some mental health challenges, but known that we're aware of was notified. Yes.
You mentioned that quick police work at the scene led them to the home and helped with that containment. What were those investigative tactics used?
There was some evidence related to the firearm and some other things that they did some quick research and data examination on, and
registered?
The weapon, yes. And it gave us a potential address, and they immediately deployed there.
So just to be clear, one weapon found on scene and then one found in his home?
So far, yes. One weapon so far found in the home, that platform rifle on the table. There is some report and information that he potentially had 2 handguns on scene. We haven't confirmed that, and obviously the witnesses are going through both medical and trauma at the moment, but that we had one person say that they thought there were 2 handguns on scene.
Sheriff, what is next for you in terms of investigation, and do you fear that you may also not be able to solve the why in this?
That's a really good question. In terms of the why, I don't know if he wrote anything, or we'll be able to gain some insight into that without him. That's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to put together what he did, timeline leading up to and after, and try to do those things. The why, if we can't find something committed like in the Oxford situation, our computer crimes was able to access digital records and devices, and we got, basically the shooter in that case saying what he wanted to do and why. It's hard to say if we're going to be able to do the same thing in this case, even if there was a record. But certainly that's going to be one of the first things that we go after, is to determine if there's either a digital or a paper trail that would give us some insight.
As far as where he used to live, do you have a record of where he was before living in Shelby Township?
All I know is this address. Obviously, that's going to be a part of the workup. We haven't really had much time to do a complete workup on him. But at this point, we're not aware of any police contact or any prior criminal history.
Sheriff, we also talked to a witness who was there shortly after this happened, came to the scene to try to help out. He seemed quite shaken. You also seemed quite shaken by this. What's your reaction? How are you processing this right now?
Well, it's hard to process. I can tell you that our whole agency has been buffeted about with a lot of challenges, from a line of duty death and COVID, and then Oxford, and then responding to MSU. And, during the Oxford wakes, we had to leave some of those services to go to an active shooter in Orion at a medical building. So, our folks, I'm so proud of them because they suit up and they go back at it. Some of the same faces that were at Oxford I saw in Orion at that active scene. And a lot of the faces I saw tonight were at both of those and MSU. And so, it's a constant challenge. And we try to do everything we can with our peer-to-peer program and our support programs for our people because it affects them. There are some people in our agency that still have not been able to come back to work after Oxford. So it's tough to process it because we feel deeply for our victims.
Sheriff, how crowded was the splash pad, and how many shots do we know how many were fired?
Well, we know, as I said, have already counted 28 casings. They're still processing the scene right now. We're looking for bullet fragments. I actually found one in the road at a distance from the site. So they're still canvassing the scene actively right now. We know that at least 28 shots were fired there. But it's still active.
Was it crowded at the time? It's a nice day today.
Yeah, it was fairly crowded. I mean, obviously, I just ran you through that list, and that was just people that were hit. We've already been able to recover some video evidence from a nearby camera. It's not great zoom-in quality, but it kind of gives some of the totality of the event.
All the victims, were they in the same general area, or were they spread throughout the splash pad?
It's not a huge area, and they were all kind of in the same area.
Do you know how the suspect was deceased? What the means was?
That obviously will be up to the medical examiner, but just from my impressions, what I saw on scene, it appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound by a handgun. So that could have been the second handgun that was seen on scene.
So there were at least two guns in the house then?
There was a handgun next to the decedent and that rifle on the kitchen table. I don't, again, know if there's more. We haven't processed the home.
Did any officers and deputies hear that gunshot, or do we believe that happened before their arrival?
No, it didn't happen before their arrival because there was some, I wouldn't call it back and forth communication, but at least an acknowledgement that we were there and we heard or saw him. But that's how we knew we had him in the building.
Okay, so he did take his own life while you were on scene outside during the standoff?
Yes.
Did the shooter get out of the vehicle at the splash pad? Or what?
Yes.
And you mentioned 3 of the 8 injured were all one family. Was it a mom and 2 kids that were there?
Yes. And 2 of the other victims were husband and wife.
Can you talk more about that live 911 system? It seems like that made a big difference here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a piece of technology that I was super excited to get and kind of inculcate into our policing capabilities, and also, married up with another technology that we've begun to use called DFR, Drones as First Responders. So with a drone, we can have an operator actually geofence the 911 call and hear a call before it gets dispatched and launch a drone to get actual what's going on, sometimes even before a car gets there, 20% of the time, and then people in that district can actually hear the call to the 911 center before it goes out over the radio. So it can markedly improve response times in an emergency, which is what it did here.
Is it protocol or will it be for deputies to hear and respond before being dispatched?
If they hear something that they think they can make a difference, absolutely they're authorized to do that. The one kind of balancing act we have is we don't want sensory overload on them trying to listen to radio, trying to listen to the phone calls, trying to drive. So we're trying to balance that, but we have that option available. It was utilized tonight to great effect, in my opinion.
Do you know how many tourniquets your deputies had to use on victims?
I don't know how many tourniquets were deployed tonight. I saw one for sure. We'd have to, that's obviously a chaotic moment. We'll have to figure that out.
This is
Yep.
still early on here, obviously, but I'm curious if the Sheriff's Office has had the chance to go through any of the shooter's social media and see if there was any motive listed there. I know you had mentioned a previous time when that was the case. Anything about?
Yeah, no, we haven't gone on social media. A lot of the stuff we recovered in previous cases has been digital evidence on devices, computers, cell phones, etc., not necessarily publicly facing, publicly posted. Whether or not he posted anything on social media or has anything on devices will be part of the ongoing investigation.
A question for the mayor, if I may.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, obviously a very difficult night for your community, usually a quiet community. What are your thoughts and how are the folks doing that you've had a chance to talk to so far?
Yeah. I love my community, and my heart breaks today. When I got on scene, and I want to echo the comments of the sheriff, we are fortunate to have the protection of the Oakland County Sheriff's Office and the hard work of the Rochester Hills Fire Department. When I got on scene, I started to cry because I know what a splash pad is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a place where people gather, where families make memories, where people have fun and enjoy a Saturday afternoon, and it wasn't today. And as you heard the victims, families, husbands and wives, what normally happens in our city didn't happen today. I've been mayor for 18 years, and I've often texted and supported my colleagues across the country who've gone through this in Orlando and Las Vegas and Pittsburgh, El Paso and Dayton. Never really thinking that it could happen in my community, and today it did. And it's a mental reset. It's a reminder that we live in a fragile place with fragile people, and it's also a reminder to be grateful for professionals. There were 100 firefighters and sheriff's deputies out there today, members of our Department of Public Services, our parks team. I'm grateful for them. They run towards, if you can imagine, a horrible scene when children are involved, and did what they do best, and our focus now is, I said earlier, singular. We are fully focused on supporting those families. One of the families that was injured is an employee of the city of Rochester Hills' family, a wife. I spoke to him tonight. We are singularly focused on supporting those families and helping our community begin to heal. That neighborhood, the Brooklands, is the oldest neighborhood in the city of Rochester Hills. It was founded in the 1920s. And there's a lot of pride in that neighborhood. There's a lot of folks that have lived there 50, 60 years. It's a close-knit community, and we're going to do everything we can to help them heal, provide the resources, and begin to get our community back on its feet again.
Can you talk more about the services that you're going to have tomorrow at DPS?
The county has been wonderful. They're sending over some support for residents that have been impacted in the community. Our own internal team has its own internal support system of folks that will come and stand alongside both our first responders and those that need support. We have a protocol in place for this. Unfortunately, it does happen when there are instances that happen in a city like ours, but it is important if you feel like you need to talk to someone, you do. Obviously, I imagine that mental health will be a discussion that will follow this story for some time. and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support those folks that have seen some very challenging things and get them the help that they need.
I guess for the sheriff, a timeline investigation, or investigation timeline on the splash pad itself. How long do you think you'll be there, and Mr. Mayor, do you anticipate reopening that?
We'll be there until it's done. You know, they're obviously doing a lot of work, and some of our partners have showed up and offered their assistance. The ATF actually brought a dog that can look for fragments, bullet fragments. So they actually have the dog out trying to find, you know, I actually found a bullet fragment in the road at some distance, so their dog is searching the scene so that we can fully document where every round ended up, if at all possible, and completely document that scene as part of the total investigation. And then as soon as we're done processing that, that'll be turned back to the city for whatever steps they're going to, you know, do.
Best guess, 48 hours, 72 hours, what do you think?
I would say probably sometime tomorrow. You know, they're gonna stay there and do it until they're done.
Can you confirm, was it 8 or 9 victims?
Originally, we had a count of 9, but apparently one of the hospitals had reported one of the victims twice. So at this point, we are confirming 8. We know for sure with injuries. And we're still trying to ascertain if anyone else self-transported somewhere else and we're not aware of it. But at this point, we have fanned out to area hospitals and have both our support team for those that are impacted and traumatized by this, and detectives to do the criminal investigation component. So both of those are at all the area hospitals. We've confirmed those 8 and the status of injuries that I told you.
You were taking notes of when you went down the list, we had 9 information for 9 people, so would it be okay to go over the list again, or I can do it with you separately if you don't want to?
Then it is 9 again.
Okay.
Because that's why I was late coming in. They gave me the actual rundown of the ages and the injuries. At one point it was 9, and then it was back to 8, and so I guess now that I've been given the formal list, we're back to 9 again. And that's what I'm saying. It's always a little bit chaotic and a bit of a flux in the early hours. Congressman?
It's been a late, tough night for a lot of people. Most of all, the families who are struggling with loved ones who are in harm's way right now. We pray for the doctors and medical professionals who are tending to the victims, and we also want to thank and praise the good Lord for first responders that mitigated an even worse event. Doing everything we can. It's very important for us to be here for the people to see that we're working at every level of government to make sure that our communities stay safe and stay whole. Under no circumstances is it normal for ice cream cones and flip-flops to be strewn amongst blood and bullet casings. I'm a combat veteran myself. I've seen this, and so if those of you who have not taken the opportunity to avail yourself of mental health services, please avail yourself of the services in the area tomorrow. And if you are listening and remote and you're experiencing a suicide or mental health crisis, please do not wait. Seek help. 988. Again, 988 is where you can seek help for yourself or a loved one who's currently experiencing a mental health crisis. We all have a role in keeping our community safer. And so as we roll into this Father's Day, please continue to keep the victims and those who are tending to them in your prayers. God bless you. Good night.
You know, one other thing I wanted to mention, excuse me, that last week I actually spoke at the North American Active Assailant Conference that was held right here in Oakland County. 1,200 people attended. So we're constantly learning from each other how we can be quicker, how we can hopefully prevent, if we can't prevent, how we respond and mitigate. Certainly I didn't expect to be back at this within a week. But I will tell you, because of those kinds of events, those training, those partnerships, Shelby Township, Troy, our neighboring partnering agencies immediately jumped in. I can't thank Shelby Township, Troy, and the other agencies enough, the fire department, ATF. We had calls from the DEA, the FBI. I had texts from Chief White in Detroit. I had texts from multiple chiefs, other sheriffs. We operate as a team when something happens like this because that's how we've trained and prepared. And that's unique. You know, as many of you know, I'm head of government affairs for Major County Sheriffs of America, and I get to see where things work well and where they don't work quite so well. And a lot of communities in this country don't have that hand-in-glove partnership with every agency that we have, and I'd like to thank all of them tonight.
Sheriff, just to clarify, both those two handguns and the gun were legally registered to the suspect?
The registrations on the gun in the home and that rifle have not been determined yet.
Okay.
The one weapon on scene led us to the address. It was registered to that address, which is why we got so quickly to the home.
Was it registered to the suspect or the mother?
That I'd have to run down. I believe it was the suspect, but it came back with that address. And as I said, the car that matched the description was in the driveway, and that put down the containment.
And the suspect had known mental health issues?
Not known to us or any other law enforcement agency that I'm aware of, but apparently to family.
This is a question for either of you. The mindset and the fears in the community. Obviously, tomorrow is Father's Day, and it's Father's Day in 15 minutes, and people want to be out and enjoying themselves. But this obviously will be a thought in their minds. What's your take on that? What's your advice for those who still want to go about their daily lives where this is obviously in the forefront?
Live your life. You can't live life in fear. You have to go out and live your life and know that should anything challenge you, threaten you, or concern you, we're here. And we're coming. And not just one or two of us, we're all coming. I remember distinctly one of our deputies had one of their children in Oxford High School and had texted her dad and was talking about the tragedy as it was playing out. And he said, basically the question was, who's coming? And the answer was, everybody. So go live your life. The statistical chance of this happening to you is low. Doesn't minimize the impact on the whole community or the individuals at all. But everything has to be taken kind of in context. So go live your life. Don't live it in fear. Be situationally aware. Obviously, we preach that all the time, so that have a plan when you get to situations. What would I do? Not just for an active threat, active assailant, active shooter, whatever the case may be. What if it's a fire? If you're in a theater, whether it's a fire, a tornado, an active threat, where are my exits? I know where I came in, where are the other ones? Situational awareness, wherever you are, is a good methodology to feeling more comfortable. It's like buying homeowners insurance. No one expects their house to burn down. They shop it, they compare it, they buy it, and they put it in a file drawer. Then they move on with their life. They don't fret that their house is going to burn down. They do things, to prevent it, if at all possible, but they don't quit living their life or enjoying their house. And that's what I would tell the people. Please go out. But as the congressman said, these tragedies are a terrible, terrible reminder to us. Don't take any day for granted. If you still have your dad, which I don't, be thankful. Spend the day with your dad and go do something fun. And tell each other you love each other. Because there's no guarantee for any of us that there's going to be a tomorrow. Ma'am?
I did have one more question actually about that video that you said that you were able to pull at the active scene. Is there any way you could describe for us what that video looked like and what you all discerned from it?
It looked chaotic. You could see people kind of just enjoying the day, and then it was a scramble. People were falling, getting hit, trying to run. The terrible things that unfortunately all of us in our law enforcement business have seen way too much.
Were you able to determine how far the shooter was from the victims? Did he stay close to the car, or did he come into the splash pad?
Still a work in progress. I haven't seen some of the video myself, but it appears, based on the evidence that I saw on scene, that he started firing once he was out of his car from the base of the steps, climbing the steps, reloading, and then was firing from the top of the steps in the splash pad area before he left, and appeared to leave in no rush. Just calmly walked back to his car. So it's a bizarre situation.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff Mike Bouchard calling the situation bizarre. We just heard from him as he recapped the situation that occurred earlier this evening in Rochester Hills. Now, there's 9 victims from that shooting at a splash pad in the Brooklands community. The ages of the victims range from 8 to 78 years old. This all comes after nearly 2 years from the Oxford shooting. Sheriff Bouchard obviously shocked about the situation, everyone. The Oakland County Sheriff calling the situation a random shooting. Now, we've been following this breaking story for hours now. Our Terrence Friday is live at Corwell Health Hospital in Rochester Hills, where some of those victims were taken. And then we also have our Kelly Vaughn, who's live at the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. First, let's go ahead and bring in Kelly. Kelly, it's overall just simply been a surreal day, wouldn't you say?
It's been a heartbreaking day. The mayor actually described breaking down in tears just being on the scene. The sheriff says this is something that law enforcement have been through too many times in this community. I've got a lot of updates to give you, but I want to start with the suspect. They tell us that the suspect is dead. They say he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound inside that home that law enforcement had surrounded him. Now, as far as the description, they told us the suspect is a white male, 42 years old. They believed that he was living with his mom, who was not at home at the time of all of this. And he did mention that they believe the suspect was going through mental health challenges. Now, to give you a kind of timeline of everything that happened today, the 911 call first came in at 5:11 with reports of an active shooter at the splash pad. The sheriff tells us that they actually have this new system in place where law enforcement can monitor live 911 calls, and they say a first responder was listening and immediately self-deployed to the scene, and they were on scene in less than 2 minutes. The sheriff says at that point the suspect had already fled the scene, but that law enforcement officer saw multiple victims. He had to do emergency first aid, even putting a tourniquet on one of the shooting victims. They say it was a beautiful Saturday afternoon. The water pad was fairly crowded, so we know at this point there were 9 victims. This number has sort of fluctuated between 8 and 10, but the sheriff says that's because hospitals had been reporting victims multiple times, so the final number is 9 victims. Some of them were in the same family, a mother and 2 children, a husband and wife, all ages. I believe Terrence is going to get more into those victims, but 9 people were shot. The sheriff tells me they found 28 shell casings at the scene, so at least 28 shots fired. There could be more. They're still processing the scene as we speak, looking for any potential bullet fragments. Now, another thing that helped them make this kind of quick connection to that home where they then surrounded the suspect was they found the weapon on the scene, and that was registered to the address that the suspect was shortly after found. So they say that played a big part in preventing any further danger, because at the press conference, the sheriff actually showed us a photo that was taken inside the home where the suspect was found dead, and it had a gun on the table. The suspect had a gun on their dining room table, so the sheriff says he doesn't know if that means that the suspect had further plans, but they do believe their quick response helped prevent any further violence that could have happened that day. Now, in their response, they used SWAT, helicopter, drones, all surrounded the surrounding the suspect. They used a drone to go inside the home where they did find the suspect dead, again, a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Now, they're going to be looking for other evidence now to see why this happened. They don't know at this point. They believe it's random. They believe mental health played a role in all of this, but that's going to be something that they figure out. They say the suspect didn't have any criminal history that they were aware of, and he didn't have any connection to that park and that splash pad. Another thing the sheriff mentioned about how this is just a continuing nightmare for them. They couldn't imagine responding to another active shooter investigation after what happened at Oxford, and the officers here also responded to what happened at MSU. He says this is something that's just all too common in America, in their community, and it's hard on the first responders, and it's of course hard on the community. So there are going to be options for anyone that needs counseling. But for now, I'll send it back to you, Terrell, in the studio.
All right, thank you so much for that, Kelly. The lasting impacts are serious as children had to witness all of this chaos. All of this, everyone, comes as June is Gun Violence Awareness Month. Once again, police say several people are hurt, some of those victims even needing surgery as well. Our Terrence Friday continues our coverage. Joining us now from Corewell Health Beaumont Troy Hospital. Terrence.
And Terrell, this is one of the hospitals treating some of those victims tonight with those injuries. We now know more details on the victims. We've got 2 people who are listed in critical condition. Also, 2 of them are children. So a detailed list just given out by the sheriff during that news conference detailing some of those victims. Here's what we know. An 8-year-old boy is the one that has the most serious condition right now, shot in the head today. During this carnage, he is now listed in critical condition. A 4-year-old boy also shot in the thigh, listed in stable condition. There is a 39-year-old woman who was shot in the abdomen and in the leg. She is also listed in critical condition. Investigators tell us those 3 are all part of the same family. In addition to them, there's a 39-year-old woman who was shot in the back and arm. She's listed in stable condition. A 30-year-old female who was shot in the thigh and also in the buttocks, now listed in stable. A 30-year-old shot in the leg in stable condition. A 78-year-old male shot in the abdomen as well. 37-year-old woman shot in the hand in stable condition, and a 40-year-old shot in the knee, listed in stable condition. This is also in addition to the other people who were hurt just trying to get away from all of that chaos that was happening there. And of course, that shooter, we're told, took his own life in this situation. The hospital sending out a statement saying that they're not going to release a lot of detailed information, but confirming that they are working to treat those victims tonight. But of course, we know that the scars here are not just physical. This will be leaving a mental scar on the people who were there and even ones who are just watching this situation. We'll continue to keep you updated over the air and online on CBS News Detroit. Live in Troy, Terrence Friday, CBS News Detroit. Back to you.
Terrence and Kelly, we appreciate your reporting this evening. Just an all-around sad situation. Now, everyone, we do have some reactions coming in from our state leaders. Governor Whitmer said, "I am heartbroken to learn about the shooting in Rochester Hills. We are monitoring this situation as updates continue to come in and are in touch with local officials." While Senator Mallory McMorrow added, "A splash pad. These are kids, babies, and families. Nobody should have to fear a day out at the splash pad. We don't have to live like this. Gun violence is a policy choice. My heart goes out to the families and friends tonight." Now, Metro Detroit, we'd like to thank you all for joining us here throughout this evening.